Welcome to another episode of the Under the Pines podcast. I am your host, Max Emmanuel. Today's episode is about relationships. In my opinion, the backbone of society, right? Doesn't matter if it's the relationship, that you have with your partner, your romantic partner, or children, or with your health, right? It's all connected. It all has an effect on everything else that you do. So if you think you're in a good spot in terms of your relationships, this episode is for you. If you still, think you've got a lot of work to do, this is also the episode for you. Jenny and Eric are the guests. We talk about this whole topic in depth. They are your people. If you need any help with it, reach out to them. There will be a link in the show notes. And if you got any value out of this episode, please like and subscribe. This will help us a lot. And I'll see you in the next one. Hello, Jenny and Eric.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Hey, guys. Thank you for hopping on. So you guys work with people and humans. And, I've had a few of your colleagues on already, but yeah, I think it's important work, and especially relationships. For me, if you think about it, it's kind of the building block of society, right? Like healthy relationships build healthy families, build, healthy kids, right? And without that, I think we're doomed. So yeah, thank you for your work, first of all. And I don't know, we can start wherever you guys want, maybe how you guys ended up where you are. I'm sure, working with a partner is interesting. I've also done that before. Just
Sweet.
Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, let me start with this. I agree completely with what you just said. The relationships are at the core of everything we do. And there are three things that people look for most when they're looking for help, which is with their life, which is health, wealth, and relationships. Those are the top three things that people look for when they're seeking to make a change in their life. And in my opinion, your health is impacted by your relationships, and your wealth is impacted by your relationships heavily. So for me, if you were going to start foundationally, I would always start with my relationship. And the first relationship any of us have is our relationship with ourselves. And a lot of people skip over that part. So that's a thing we have to talk to people about, is that actually your first relationship is you. It's not with your partner. It's not with your family. It's not with your work. It's with you. And so one of the things that we believe in is that a healthier, happier, more fulfilled you will create healthier, happier, more fulfilled relationships, which will then lead you into opening the right doors at the right time when you're ready for it in your life. And that can be applied in so many different ways, but that's what I think we can start with, and why we do this in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really interesting to think about how, our relationship with ourselves and with each other is influenced by so many different things, right? Our upbringing, what we learned from our parents, siblings if we had them, what we learned from TV, music, right? Movies, all of these things. And it's really a place of being able to start asking questions. Like, what is my view of relationships? Because right now you'll see a slew of messaging around relationships that either like all men are bad or girls are this and blah, 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 all of the things, right? Relationships don't work. Or, oh, if there's a happy couple, they're faking it. It's not real and blah, 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 right? You just mentioned right now too, is like the different layers that are involved in being in relationship. And, when it comes to the different dynamics that are at play, right? Like what our role is with each other starts with how I am treating myself. And what's really been interesting about our journey and where we're at now is that at the beginning, it was more, I would say, free flow. Whatever goes, we're going to figure it out. And there's fun moments and there's not so fun moments, but I don't really want to talk about the issues. So let's just like kind of dance around this to get to more fun. But then because we were avoiding the real raw conversations, we were actually avoiding real intimacy. And that once we started to recognize, oh, I'm avoiding being intimate with myself. And until I started to explore my relationship with me, I was able to open up more to him. And so we've been dating since 2006. That's when we first met in high school. We say it was a chance meeting at the movies, like less than a mile away from here, right? And actually, April was the month that we met, so happy Metch anniversary.
Happy Metch month.
But you know, it's really been quite an adventure, and the coolest thing to reflect on now that you've had these amazing people who know about the words, the language, and the magic is, what are the words that we're using to describe our relationship? Because if we say our relationship is an adventure, that's one thing. If we say our relationship is what's the fun word? It's a dumpster fire. Both of those are giving you a very clear mental image of two totally different relationships that I'm sure you know people who have had both. Or maybe you've experienced both yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely that. But sure, especially working on ourselves, right? We don't learn that right early on. I think if we would, it's a prevalent kind of theme, you know, it doesn't matter who I talk to, everyone that got far in life, they understood that they first have to, you know, work on themselves and then everything else will follow, right? But when we're younger, it's so difficult, right? Like you just get into like some relationship, it's mostly external stuff that, you know, you're attracted to the looks and, you know, but just like you said, you know, media gives you that idea of how a woman should look like for us men, right? And what a man should be for the women and all that crap, right? But then the important conversations are avoided, right? And you know, every relationship will reach that point, right, where either you go deeper or, you know, go separate ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an inevitability. So I think one of the things that we promote with people and we do ourselves is to be open to discussing your wants, your expectations. And I think that when we're young, especially when you're trying to figure out who you are, it's hard to describe those things because those wants are changing all the time. And I think it's not until you have a little bit more experience in life, both together and with other people that are outside your relationship, that you start figuring out what you want. And then at that point, it's your responsibility then to have a conversation so that you can create an opportunity for more closeness. And I think that that's the thing that so many people nowadays look at feelings, talking about your dreams or like what you want for life. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that are scared of those conversations. They're scared to have them because then it makes them real. Or they will turn it into like this weird self-sabotaging thing of like, well, I don't want to even say what I want because I won't get it anyways. Or like, what's the chances of me getting it anyway? So I'm not even going to go talk about this thing. And now you're just shutting off this whole aspect of life that could happen for you. Because you don't feel like it's possible, or you don't feel like you're worthy of the result. And that's a really common thing. I didn't expect that to be such a common thing when we first started working with people, but it's incredibly common that people will stop themselves from taking the very first step in their relationship with themselves and with other people because they think that it's not going to work out anyways. And that's a crazy thing to see that's repetitively come up. Mainly because we're just cutting ourselves off from joy because of the fear of something bad happening. And there's a direct correlation between the amount of good we can experience, joy, fulfillment in our life, with how much pain we're willing to tolerate. And when we avoid hard conversations, we also avoid the joy that's on the other side of knowing that you're on the same path together in life. And so if you're not willing to do one, you can't get the other side. And I think that that's something that we preach, we talk about a lot with people, to be brave. It's easy to shut down. Easy. It's like there's not hard at all. It takes a lot of courage to step up and say how you feel about things. It takes a lot of courage to step up and say what you don't like about what's happening in your relationships right now. And again, this is not just with us. This is like, if I don't like where my health's at right now, it starts with me telling the truth about I don't really like where my health's at right now. Instead of skipping over it and trying to say, well, I have this going on, I have that going on, I don't have time, which is my favorite excuse from people, is I don't have time, right? Which is like, I've done an exercise with people where I'll have them write out the whole hours of the week and everything that they do, and they always have like 30 hours left over after we include sleep, all their work, all their fun, all their bullshit stuff that happens later, like, and there's always like 20 or 30 hours left over, and they're like, wow, I didn't realize I had that much time. Where did that go? You know? So for me, there's a lot of really simple things, like being willing to experience the ebbs and flows of life, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad. And I think that a lot of growth happens from those with yourself and with other people.
Yeah, it's easy to walk away, right? Like it's also encouraged, right? You get all these apps and you know, it's basically what's cool, right? It's like, you know, you can have many women. Wow, that's cool, right? Like you're the man, right? And then, but reality is different, right? Like us men, we have like this disadvantage early on, right? Because we kind of grow slower in a sense, right? So we're with women that are kind of more ahead and further ahead, like mentally and physically early on. Sure. So we already, you know, we're struggling there. And then later on, we're like, well, now we can switch that around maybe, you know, and then the ego comes into play and all that kind of crap. And yeah, it's in the end, it's about, I think, being, you know, truthful, right? Because that's very difficult for people, like speaking their truth. You know, it's like with a lot of people I know, especially males, they don't even know what their truth is, right? So how are you going to find the right partner? Because you're not going to attract the right partner because you're not even speaking it out yourself, right? So yeah, it's a very, very tough one.
Yeah. And even as you were talking, I got that image of, if you've ever watched The Notebook, there's a scene where he asks her, "What do you want?" And she says, "It's not that simple," right? And what's funny is I think that it encapsulates this really very real image and example of how we're not really taught how to communicate, right? With the different people that you've had on here, we're taught about, you know, spelling in school. We're taught with grammar and, you know, punctuation and all these things, but how to actually communicate and express yourself, you know? And that was one of the things for me growing up, obviously because of past situations and what I experienced when I was younger. It was really, really hard for me to make these sounds and let him know what I was thinking and feeling. And what was always so interesting for me was like, he knew when I wanted to say something, and I knew I wanted to say it, but I was like, in my head, I was like, there's something missing from here to here. How do I access that? And for me, what was really helpful in that phase was to write it down. And that was like the first step. Because for the longest time, I told myself the story that I wasn't good at communicating. And the truth is, I wasn't, because I didn't until I did. And then I got better.
Practice.
right? Until I did and I got better. And that's really like the theme of what we do is like anything that you want to get better at, you can. We believe in the human potential, right? We believe in how magical and powerful we are when we believe in ourselves. And at the core of our beliefs are thoughts that we kept thinking. And we bring it back to what are thoughts? A series of words. What are the words that you're telling yourself, right? How are those words building the stories? Stories create reality, right? Change the words, change the story, and here we are.
Yeah, that's communication is key. Yeah, for me as well. I mean, these past maybe 2 years have changed a lot in that sense, because I'm also writing down everything, right? Like on a daily basis almost. Maybe, there's a day or two that I miss sometimes, but usually I write everything down, and it just gives that clarity, right? And like also what you just said is like where did you take the wrong turn? Like, where you actually talking about yourself in the wrong way, right? And especially with kids, now I kind of realize that it's very important, what comes out of my mouth, right? How I talk to my partner, because they pick it up, right? They see it, they listen to it, and they will magnify it, right? And so
Absolutely.
that was the crucial part where I was like, okay, now I have to really get my shit together, because like, not even when I'm angry, I can't say that stuff that I want to say, or maybe, just watch my language, especially then. And yeah, it's so important. How was that for you guys? Like, when did you basically know you want to work in that field? Was that kind of, did you just, get into it, or were there some major like events that pushed you into it?
Well, okay, yes to both, because there's always a series of events, right, that happens, and we made efforts to make it happen as well. And so, because we've been together since high school, I would say most of the couples we meet, we've experienced more connection than they have, because we've been together for longer. We've been through more ups and downs, and most of the time. And so people have always been looking to us for advice on relationships, in my opinion, even when we were really young. And it wasn't until the last maybe like 2 or 3 years that it clicked, that it was like, this is the thing that we know really well. We have a lot of personal and professional experience with, and we like talking about it. And yeah. I honestly, more importantly than that, I would love to get to a point where people can have this type of relationship that her and I have, not only as a partnership, but I wish, like, we have our greatest strength is that we're friends. Like, I not only am deeply in love with her, but I like who she is as a person. And even if we weren't in a romantic relationship, I would still really like who she is. That wouldn't change at all. And I think she feels the same way about me. I'm not gonna speak for you, but yeah, obviously,
I agree.
I'm pretty cool, And so, for me, I think that there's this component of like, if we could get more people to like each other, to enjoy spending time together, I think relationship issues would solve themselves, because you'd want to talk to people, right? Like, think about when you meet someone that you really like, you want to talk to them about things, right? It happens naturally. And I think what happens in relationships is we put this weight on it, right? And we put this extra responsibility of like, I got to make sure I'm saying the right things all the time. That doesn't happen when you're in a friendship with someone. Right? When you're in a friendship, you just talk about things. You're not worried about making a mistake on something that you say. You're like, I'm just going to say what I feel, because this person cares about me. So what if we went into all our situations that we had with all the relationships in our life with the assumption that other people are going to mirror back to me the way I show up? Now, obviously, there's going to be moments where that doesn't happen, obviously, because we're all humans and not everyone's on the same wavelength as us. But I feel like most of the time, when you show up from that place of assuming people are nice and they're going to respond back to you in the same way you are, then just show up in that way. and things will work out for themselves. And, you know, in my opinion, there were a lot of series of steps that got us to this point. So to get back to your question, like we started in fitness. This is how we started coaching, was fitness. And so many other coaches we know started in fitness. And we figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't the only thing that people needed. Right. And so then we move into like nutrition. What are we eating? And through the nutrition program, it was heavily based on, we did precision nutrition, and it was heavily based on habits and behaviors, which then led into mindset, which is where a lot of the people we've met through, which is in Lifted. Mm-hmm. And so our progression has taken us through mind, body, and soul a little bit, where we're making this full connection with people. And we didn't do it on purpose. We weren't intentionally thinking this is how it's going to go. But it's also ironic, beautiful. Of course it would happen like that, because I think the best things in life do incorporate mind, body, soul, whether you're aware of it or not. You know, like your awareness doesn't matter at all. You can totally be aware of it. You cannot be aware of it. And the best things in life incorporate those three things. Mm-hmm. And so once we hit that track in our professional journey, and then it was clear we can use all of our skills that we've done to help couples, because I think that's the best way to help people in the world. Well, if we want to help couples, we have to help the individual too, because you're one person that's part of a pair. And it became so obvious at that point, in my opinion, and you can touch on this some more right now too. But for me, it was like the obvious thing. It was the light bulb thing. It was like, of course, this is the thing we should have been talking about from the beginning. We know this. Like, I know this, like, no problem. And I enjoy talking to people about their relationships, you know? And so, that was how we got to this point.
Yeah. And, you know, a really cool reflection point now is like recognizing the comfort and that you have to face what you're comfortable with, because we were comfortable with the fitness stuff, right? Like that was the comfortable thing. It was like, I you know, we had talked about essentially something along the lines of that since we first started dating, right? When we first started dating, he was studying psychology. I was in school for exercise science, and we had talked about the mind body lab or something like that. Right. And so it was always something around that. And once it started to develop and grow and incorporate and essentially create an identity of itself, right, is like we saw where it was growing as we were growing. And the aspect of becoming aware of where you're comfortable is important, because the relationship coaching part felt scary. Who are we to do that? Well, yeah, we've been dating for a long time, but like, you know, our studies were in X, Y, and Z, and how are we going to become, you know, experts in this field and be trusted? And it's like, okay, well, wait, we do have our own lived experiences and the professional background that we have already gathered and will continue to gather. And that was a really cool place to recognize where in a past version of us, the thing that we wanted would have felt so far away and we would have talked ourselves out of it, versus now recognizing that's what I want. How can I talk myself into it and make it happen?
Nice one. Yeah, it's for me with the podcast, it was similar. You know, I'm also, you know, always trying to grow and go where kind of I have a little fear and a little resistance, and maybe also a lot of resistance. That's also why I started this, you know, because I talk about a lot of stuff that I kind of never wanted to talk about publicly, right? It's not just relationships and stuff, you know, like politics and all that kind of, you know, this fear of the world we live in, right? But yeah, it's beautiful. It's basically when you start growing, right? You don't wanna stop, right? And then you kind of saw where it takes you, and it was clear, right? You have to go that way.
Yeah, I think sometimes the path is hard to see, and you're not sure, and this is when you make moves. And then other times it's super obvious. It's just boom, there you go. And I think both are equally important to recognize.
totally.
I always tell people you're never off path at any point. You're just not always able to recognize what the path is, but you're always walking it. You're never off path, no matter what.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, sometimes it's a hard lesson, right? And you think like, what the hell happened here, right? And then just a couple years later, you see why it happened, and it was a lesson for you, right? Like for me, for example, I had a big bang with a relationship in my 20s, right? Like it was like a proper explosion, right? But that kind of, made me, the man I am today, like literally, right? Like it basically pushed me into self-development, like more, because I always thought, I can separate business and work, and, I was blind to the people around me because I was, just focusing on one end, right? Like, okay, that's, I can work with this guy money wise, but would ignore the personality and all that kind of stuff, right? So that relationship kind of showed me everything that I was doing wrong, and I'm really thankful for that. So it's all just like you said, it's the own path, and it has to happen, right? And so it's all good.
Yeah. The fact that you can say thank you, right? Thank you for this explosion. Thank you for this thing that in the moment was like, ugh, but after being like, whoa, the way that happened led me to here. And yeah, it's what's the phrase, hindsight is 2020, right? Mm-hmm. Looking forward, a little fuzzy, but I look back, I'm like, okay, I see where I came from. And as I get more clear about what I want, that's how we can get, future focused to look clearer too, to see where I'm at, where I'm going. Right. And what's been really interesting, especially being able to learn from and utilize the Unlifted method. Obviously, we're client number one. Right. And so being able to see how our past influences are present and working through some of these past experiences and stories to recognize how we got here. Right. And then be able to say, well, if this is how it's influenced me up to this point, how do I want to move forward? Right? How do we want to move forward? And, this brings us back to our wants, right? I remember it was, I believe it was 2020 during the shutdowns. I came across someone on Instagram, and I want to say her Instagram, I believe she's still on there. She was called That Sex Chick, and she is a sex and relationship coach. This was prior to us being into the relationship field. This was when we were, still starting our health and wellness coaching. And one of the things that I found on her Instagram page, she called it the want, will, won't list. I don't know if it's still available online or if there's other people who have their own version, but I remember seeing it and being like, whoa, this is edgy. This feels scary. And I think we need to talk about this. And I remember bringing it up and saying, hey, I found this thing. Would you be open to going through it together? And essentially, it's this whole list of if you want to look it up, it's a list, okay? It's a list of all the things that you get to say, oh, yes, I want to do this. I'm willing to do this. And I won't do this. And when I remember having that conversation was such an interesting experience, because you talk about those those expansion contraction moments. It was absolutely both in in the best way possible, because that showed me that we can have conversations that a past version of me couldn't have gotten myself to participate in, and just thinking about those moments, right? Those pivotal moments that do open up doors for the next version of you, and opportunities for how the relationship gets to continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, for me, it was, I learned through the years, trust is super important, respect. And, I needed to see that this person is willing to evolve, right? And when I had these three things, and the trust thing is like you can feel it with the heart, with the soul, if that's if that works with that person or not. And so that was the basis of the relationship I'm in now, right? Like my wife. And I think if I don't know, you can add to that, right? But like those are like for me the main three pillars kind of a successful relationship. I don't know if you think there's stuff to add, but like I think that's the main part.
Yeah, I agree. I think that most people, if you were to ask them, if you were to do a Google search, you'd find communication, you'd find trust, you'd find intimacy, you would find respect as well. I think those are all really common things that you'll see for most people. And I think that the reason why it's so common is because it actually has nothing to do with romantic relationships. That's what you expect from all your relationships, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, then the question becomes, well, then what do I really want in my romantic relationships then? If I want those four things that I just said in all my relationships, then what do I really want out of my romantic relationship? And I would say it's partnership for me. Having someone, and where do we just saw this? It was like having someone to witness life with you. There's 8 billion people, right? You don't have people to share life with. Like, did you exist at all? And part of this thing is we want to do life together. Could we do life on our own? Well, of course you could, but like, why? That's my thing. And I'm not one of these people. I know right now there's a popular thing going on with this whole antisocial thing, right? That people are like, I don't like people. Let me just stay away from them. Guys, you've never had a day in your life that you didn't experience life with people. Because what do people do when they avoid other people? They stay at home and watch Netflix. What's Netflix? It's an app originally, or it's a site that's filled with people, run by people, with stories that usually pertain to people. And when we hear a good story when we're watching TV, it's because it's a story's relatable to our lives. So like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't like people or you don't want to experience life with people? To me, it's like, well, what that says to me is that you're not in tune with yourself. So you can't find other people that are like you because you don't know who you are. Which brings me right back into ours. How can I have respect for her if I don't have respect for myself? How can I communicate with her if I don't communicate with myself? Right? How can I love, create closeness, intimacy when I don't have that with me? And so while there's so many of these things that we both really want to get into with couples. So what her and I really like doing, and we got certified with them to do this, is the Gottman Institute. And so they run a whole program for married couples that we have. And what we realized through the program, when we were looking at, we were like, this is amazing for couples. And then we were like, but not everybody is ready for this level of commitment because they're not in a position to even communicate this at all. So then what do we do? And it was like, okay, well, how do we actually help couples then? Well, I got to figure out a way in which that I can help you work on you within the context of your relationship. So I want to show up as a better version of me so that I can be a better partner for her. Right? If you have kids too, I want to show up as a better parent for my kids, right? I want to be a better brother, a better sister, right? A better son, a better daughter, all those things, right? And the only way I can do that is if I'm working on being a better me. And so while all those things you mentioned are super important, I think, again, they all start with you as an individual. And I think when you do that, this part becomes easy. It's easy. The door's open for it when you do that. And it's a door you can walk through, no problem at all. So I think the reason why people struggle in relationships today really has nothing to do with other people. It has to do with the struggle that we're seeing with people not processing the things that are happening to them, not saying the things that they want or are willing to do or don't want to do. You know? And I think that that's what makes what we do so unique is that I don't want you to just walk around and say, my partner's doing this, my partner's doing this, my partner's doing this. I want you to walk in and say, this happened and this is how I'm feeling about it. And because I'm feeling about it, this is now what's happening as a result of that. So can we address this and can we communicate I really like that you did this. Can we do more of that? As well as, hey, this happened and I don't feel good about it and I don't like that. And I would prefer if we don't do that. Or can you come up with some other options that we can do to replace it?
Mm-hmm.
That takes a deep level of self-awareness in order for me to have that conversation with her.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I said, like, I'd like to see that little part, you know, where I know, okay, this person wants to grow, right? Because I think when just one is growing and evolving and the other one stays the same, it's not going to work out, right? In the long run.
Yeah.
It's just going to break apart at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know what's been really interesting too to recognize within relationships that there's this like I haven't figured out exactly what, if there's a specific term for it or what about relationships that pulls this in, but we were recently reading The Power of Now. And even in that book, they reflected how when you're in relationship, you have these moments where you see each other and you see yourself in a different light. And there are some times that in relationship, people will bring out the worst in each other. The things that people say to each other and like put each other down. The name calling, the, you know, like demeaning characters and attitudes is like things that you would never say to another person. Right? And I'm not sure like what about certain relationships, like how it leads to that point. But I do know that it happens in families too, family dynamics as well, right? The people that sometimes you're the closest with, they see some of the most like raw and just like, oof, those I would say like low moments, right? But what's also interesting is I recently heard this it was like a post on Facebook, and it was like a storytelling post, and what they were talking about was like, you know, in the beginning of relationships, things are happy, they're playful, you're on your best behavior, right? You want to smell good, you want to look presentable, you want to do all the things. And then there's a certain point where things start to change up just a little bit, right? You're not as bright and shiny because it's not as brand new, right? The toy's been played with for some time now, and so what do? Well, in that moment, what some people, like you said, it's a turning point. Either you continue to go into it and learn more about each other, or you decide that it's time to go away. Well, that point is actually a really beautiful point, because what it means is you've started to build trust to be able to let the walls down a bit. You don't have to be, you know, hair perfectly in every spot and makeup always done and all the things, right? I want you to see me. I want you to see all of me, right? And there's no hiding behind filters and all those things. They get to see you, and do you trust yourself to be seen in that way? Because that's where the true vulnerability comes in. And so what's really beautiful about that is like what gets to happen because you allow the intimacy to happen, because you allow, and you know, intimacy broken down into me, you see. Right? It's like, can you truly let that person see you and all of you and all the, you know, all the angles, the lighting, the whatever it is, good days and the bad, and say like, here I am.
Yeah, totally. The part where you said, you know, these relationships where then like they bring the worst part out of each other. Like I've had that, and I've seen it with people, and I think it's then that you realize it's not a fit. You know, it's definitely not a fit, because I think once you're at that point, it's already progressed like way too far. You know, I don't think you can build back from that. But yeah, that's also stuff one has to learn through time, right? And then also what you said, like showing your face, your full face right away, right? That's stuff that you know, the older you get, the easier it is, right? Like at the first date, you talk about like the, you know, heavy stuff right away, boom. You know, like, can you deal with that? Like this is the stuff I think about, you know, and then it's super quickly you can see, okay, this is a person, you know, that I can be friends with even, right? I want to talk about these topics, like apart from the romance and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're talking about right now too is similar to what we were saying earlier, which is building a friendship first. And I think that's a missing component for a lot of people is they want to build this beautiful movie-esque romantic comedy relationship. Well, they don't want to like create a bond first. 'Cause creating a bond is hard.
Yeah.
Anyone can go drive to Vegas and go get married, like no problem. And there's a thing. This is a thing that I think has shifted in our dynamic in regards to how we see marriage. Because in the earliest days of marriage, it was tactical, right? Like strategic. You did it because you needed to survive. And nowadays that's less important, generally speaking, in the world. And now I think what's happening is people are looking for someone to, as you mentioned, evolve through life with. And I want to grow together. And what I think is interesting too about what you said earlier is if you have one partner that wants to evolve and one partner that wants to stay the same. Well, in my opinion, there is no staying the same. Ever. You cannot stay the same. Yeah. Like that doesn't exist because full stillness is death.
Yeah.
Right? And there is no scenario where you stay the same. So if you have a partner that's like, I want to stay the same, while she wants to grow, or I want, right? If in this case, so she's like, I really want to grow, and I'm like, no, I just want to stay the same. Well, there's a lack of acknowledgement about life on my end. That's going to be the disconnector. Is like you don't understand how life works. There is no staying still. So you're basically saying you want to work backwards.
Yeah.
Right? And that will definitely create problems. And I think those are the things that lead to the worst getting brought out in people, because then there's going to be a sense of resentment, right? From her to me, a sense of rejection from me to her. That's just going to drive us further apart. Right? And if we don't feel comfortable showing up authentically, then it's just going to keep going in the other direction until something happens. Right? So here's another interesting part too, that I think does happen in relationships that I think is important to talk about too, is that I think nowadays, what's easy to do for people is to get into arguments about things as their means of communication. So they don't feel comfortable communicating their wants and needs. So they don't say anything until it hits a blow up point. And then it hits a blow up point and they finally say all the things that they have been meaning to say. You have makeup, right? Whatever makeup looks like to you, right? And then you feel good because you're like, oh, we're close again. That's a problem. Let me tell you why it's a problem. It's not the making up part. It's that you're going to be addicted to creating the problem that led to the closeness. And now you're in a perpetual loop. The only way I get closeness is to create a problem. That's the only way I get it. So now I'm subconsciously finding ways to create problems instead of speaking on the things that you want, because that creates closeness a lot faster than drama does, or creating a problem, right? Saying how you feel to someone, being honest about it, going back and forth, which sometimes those can be really tense, those types of conversations. So you got to be able to have some level of emotional regulation as well. And I think that's the biggest pattern that I see with people is, can you say the thing when it's happening, when it's not a big deal, when it's still small, like keep the story small, versus I'm going to put this thing here, I'm going to put that thing here, this thing there, and now I don't have anywhere to put all these things, so now I have to put them all out and say them all.
You use them
and
as
you're just
ammo.
chucking them. Yeah, boom, you remember this thing? Boom, you remember that thing? Boom, you remember this thing 20 years ago? No, I don't, And so, but obviously you do, And to me, that's a thing I see with a lot of couples that happens. That's unnecessary, and I think they don't even realize that they're in a loop at all. they think this is part of their regular life, and like this is what their relationships are.
Yeah, and a part of that too is expecting the other person, because we've been together for so long, because he knows me, or he should know me. He should know how I feel and what I'm thinking and all of the things, right? It's like, how many arguments? Question, right? True pop quiz. How many arguments have you had with your partner in your head, with them not even being present for, the conversation? And it's like, in your head, you're always going to win, and you're going to find all of the, comebacks and the things. Like, you're literally prepping for something, that big blowout, right? And how much of this is that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Is like, if you expect that that's the only way that you'll communicate, yes.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Took me a few routes while you were talking. Yeah, it's for me, I learned, to basically look for my regulated nervous system. If the other person calms me down, then I know, okay, this is the, at least a good basis for what's to come, right? Because before I would also, just like choose whatever was interesting, where I could have the most fun, right? What was the best, like these boss babe kind of types, right? Like that was what I thought that worked, and obviously never worked out. But yeah, that nervous system part is very interesting. Like how much you talk about like that topic with people. Do they understand, like in general, or is that very rare that?
So what's really interesting about that is, about just over a year ago, I went through a certification called NeuroFit, and it's literally fitness for your nervous system, and allowing yourself to check in. What are your triggers? What's the way that you express yourself during those triggering moments, right? And then on the other side too, when we went through the Gottman training it's the 7 principles for making marriage work. And within that, they talk about how, when you're in conflict situations, if you're flooded, they literally calling flooded, that's chemicals, right? That's the hormones. That's all of the things that are going to bring your heart rate up. When you're bringing your heart rate up, now you're narrowing you're getting tunnel vision, right? You may not even be able to hear as well. And all in those moments, you're not actually there to communicate constructively. You're there to fight, right? And so it's important to be able to recognize when that's happening and say, oh, we're in the moment right now. Can we have a moment to pause, to bring ourselves, either if we're in a good place, we can do it together. Hey, can we please take a couple breaths? I'm noticing that I'm really getting to a place where I know what happens after, right? It's like, can we take a couple breaths together? Or being able to say, I want to respect this conversation, and I don't want to just walk away from it, but I do need a moment, right? It's like, that's part of it. Sometimes you get to do your own moment of, self-regulation, and sometimes you come together and say, can we just like hold hands, right? Holding hands together, right? Holding hands. Think about fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, am I going to be holding hands, getting close, snuggled up? No, I'm running, and my blood's flowing and pumping and getting me ready to get out of here, right? So if I'm in fight or flight, there is no way that I can be here. The other part of that too is recognizing the freeze response. The person that can't speak, they're likely in that freeze response, right? And so it's going to be hard for them to talk. It's not that they don't know how, right? Hello, that's me raising my hand here, right? It's not that I didn't know how to talk. I just didn't have access to it in that moment. So what are the things that I can do to bring myself back here, to be here with him, right? Part of that is letting him know, like, oof, I'm really feeling it right now, and I could use a little, support, or I could use a moment, whatever that is.
Yeah, the BPM is 100. So if your BPM goes over 100, I think you can only comprehend 20% of the things that are being said to you. So 100 BPM is not that much, right? Like you could get into an argument really quickly and be at 100. You could be over 100 really quickly. if you're in a heated discussion. And so being able to recognize that, you're right. And so some of the things that we do when we're in here, just to like provide some value for the listeners, right, is like one of the things she just mentioned, holding hands. Like, it's hard to be angry at someone when you're holding hands. Super hard. Because there's no part of you that wants to be, except your mind. Your mind's the only part that wants to be angry, and that's that ego center of like wanting to be in control, and like, I'm angry, so I want to be angry, and no, don't take me out of my anger state right now. And so holding hands is a big deal. I also think one of the things we teach people that really works well is getting on the same side of the table. So like, instead of us arguing like this at each other, or standing shoulder to shoulder arguing, right? But it stops becoming an argument when that happens, because now we're just talking about what the problem is instead of talking at each other. And that's a big deal for most people, right? Literally getting on the same side of the table, literally, not figuratively. It's like you literally walk over there and stand shoulder to shoulder with each other. And those are those little things. I also want to bring up freeze for a second, because most people are aware of flight or fright. And they think that flight or fight is the most common reactions that you're going to have. It's not. The most common reaction that people have when they hit crisis situations is freeze, unless you're trained. If you're trained, or if you just like you've been in situations where you know what to do, go. But most people are not that familiar with heavy, tense situations. Your average person is not. And so when they get into something like that where they're upregulated, the likelihood is that you're going to freeze. I think the important part that was really hard for me when she did this was because I grew up away from my mom. I had a big abandoned wound. I had a big mother wound. So for me, when she didn't want to talk to me, it felt like abandonment. It felt like you were abandoning the conversation, and therefore you're abandoning the relationship because of that. Because if you don't want to talk about things, then is this really that important to you? Which is A, not true, B, not fair to her, and C, probably most importantly, that's not fair to me. To be able to say that now, because she's struggling to communicate how she's feeling, now she's going to leave the relationship because she's struggling in this moment. And now I'm not even talking to her. Now I'm talking to my mom.
Right.
You know? And I think that's something that's more common than people realize, is like, I'm not actually arguing with you right now. I'm arguing with someone else, and I can't let go of that. Because if I do, then, especially for men, this is a big deal for men. If I let go of that, I feel like less than, because men don't surrender. We keep moving forward, right? and it's one of those things that I get just with a lot of men, is like taking a break, a 20-minute break is healthy, very healthy. It doesn't mean you don't care about each other. In fact, it means you really care about each other, and you're willing to walk away from this for a second and come back to it when you feel a little bit better. And that 15, 20-minute break in between, when things, we call it flooding, right? And that's when you hit that high state, when you recognize I'm upregulated, right? You walk away. And how many times, I don't know about you, but like, how many times have people said,
I was just saying, a little note, walk away with the intention to down-regulate, not walk away and plan and prep all of the things to get right back into it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's important.
Yeah, good point. And I think that's a thing that is a difference maker. We grew up with all the cliches that everyone else grew up with, which is, you don't go to sleep angry at each other, right? You stick it out no matter what, and all these things. It's like, no, like, we don't have to do that. Like, I used to think we shouldn't go to sleep like upset, but the reality is that like, there may be a moment where I'm upset and I can't sleep. That shouldn't mean that she has to stay up while I'm sleeping, while I'm upset. And maybe I'm not even upset with her. Why would she need to stay up because I'm upset? And those are these like really obvious common sense things when you're not upset that make sense, but when you're upset can be a problem. Can be a problem for people.
And that's really the game field, right? It's like these conversations like this is training, right? But that's where it actually gets put into play, is like You can read about all the things, you could read about all the nervous system regulation and do practices here and there, but in the moment, that's where it matters. And I want to add, I'm glad that you shared the aspect of recognizing how the conversations that we were having when they were getting heated, both of our childhood wounds were coming into play. My freeze response shut down, his abandonment, right? And what was really, really powerful for both of us to learn is, okay, I don't have to fix. There's nothing to fix here, right? I don't have to fix him. He doesn't have to fix me. But I love him. And so I need to be aware of how my behaviors impact him. If it doesn't matter, I'll keep doing it and whatever. That's his thing to deal with. It does matter. And so it's like, oh shoot, how is this thing that I'm doing causing him pain or influencing the way that he's feeling? Can I do something about it? Yeah. Right? If I can't, well, I explain this thing. But in this scenario, I can do something about it. And because it matters, I will work on it. I will do my best. I know I'll also mess up. That's part of the process of learning, right? It's like mistakes matter too. I'm not going to be perfect every time, neither is he. And so having that grace for each other to make mistakes, to get upset, right? We're gonna have conflict situations. Once we got actually okay with that, that's actually when things started getting better, because we were starting to talk about the things that were really important to us. We were doing it in a much better way too, right? Not in a way that was just attacking each other, right? Like you said, using all of those examples and experiences to throw at each other, And so that's, I think, where the growth really started to unfold.
Yeah, that's very advanced though, right? That's exactly what happens when you have successful relationships, right? That's the basis of it. At least the ones I encounter, that's kind of where it separates, right? Because oftentimes it's always one that's kind of swallowing, right? That's just kind of being quiet, and the other one is directing everything, right? And a lot of times it's also the woman, right? And the man is just kind of quiet and pretending like he's handling it, but yeah, it doesn't work out. There's so much stuff that we could basically talk about right there, but what you said before was interesting in regards to parents, right? Because I think that's what everybody has to fight with and work through is how they grew up, what the ancestry was like, and what the problems were in childhood and stuff like that. But oftentimes also from my experience, it's very difficult when you grow up with just one parent, right? And then you already have so much baggage, right, to work through to get that relationship thought of a perfect relationship, right, and into the right sphere, because you just grew up with a completely how could I phrase it, it's almost like a detached kind of I don't know,
just
Yeah,
not
attached,
having
right?
those
It's
examples, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where you want to pick up on that, but how do you work through that kind of stuff, right? Let's give some practical application here.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is with regard to your upbringing and how it relates to your adult relationships is, and I'll speak for me and my example, and then we can use it. Is, so for me, there was a fear around relationships because so in my case, I was removed from both of my parents' care. So I didn't have my mom or my dad. And so to trust someone took a lot from me, because for me, the greatest protection I could have was keeping things surface level. That was the deepest level of protection I could provide myself. And so getting into conversations with her or with really anyone that was deep was out of the question. Out of the question. Because in my mind, it was everyone is eventually going to leave me anyways. So why am I going to waste my time getting closer with someone? In my case as well, the only other person in my childhood, I should say there were two people that I got close to in my childhood, and one of them passed away my freshman year of high school in a crazy drunk driving accident. And so then at that really crucial point in my life, I was definitely like, no, I'm not going to do this. The fact that her and I got so close while I was in high school, I didn't realize this until recently, but honestly, it was crazy that I did because I had no intention of getting close to someone and expressing any of it, and it just happened very naturally with us. And so to get back to the practical application of how does your childhood impact your adult life? Well, if you have unaddressed fears about the way that your life is gonna work out. In my case, it was I'm gonna end up alone anyways. Well, what was happening is that subconscious behavior then was being reflected back into my day-to-day living. So if she didn't agree with me, she couldn't come over. And remember when we first started dating, it was like, can you come over? Right? We weren't living together. So you can't come over, you're hanging out with the girls. Well, obviously she doesn't want to hang out with me. That's the first assumption in my head. Right? And so the best thing I think any of us can do to start creating a gap between what happened in our childhood, the fears that happened to us in our childhood, and how our real world is to honestly take a breath. Is to really be simple, take a breath, and then examine what am I afraid of? Mm-hmm. Because we can live in fear and we can make decisions in fear that will lead us to more fear. We can also stop for a second and just look at where are my belief systems coming from. And I think just the process of looking at them changes them. So you don't have to go into these things thinking, I'm going to change my entire identity around the way I see the world. What you do is you go in and you say, what are my beliefs around the world and how did I get to this point? Mm-hmm. And I think the how is very important. I know we live in a world where like why is everything. And it is important. Why? And the how, in my opinion, is where the most bang for your buck is how did I get to this point? How did I come to this belief? How did I get from this point in my life to this other point? And so for me, as soon as I started addressing those beliefs and acknowledging honestly, which is funny because this whole conversation when we first started, you brought this up about being truthful, right? And sometimes the truth is harsh. And in order to get to the truth, you have to go through the harsh to get there. And I think that when I started doing that, and I would encourage everyone from doing this, is take a hard look in the mirror, right? And when you're ready to look at some of those things, I think you can do it on your own. There are plenty of ways you can self-help, plenty of ways. And the best things that I got was when I reached out for help for other people. And I got help from someone else who has either been through something or can at least mirror back to me things that I'm not seeing in myself. And so to get back to wrap it up really quickly, for me, I think the best thing you can do to transcend your childhood circumstances is to take an honest look at them and then make a choice whether you want to follow them or not.
Good one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's what like Mark also talks about, right? Like think about your thinking and that's basically it, because a lot of people don't do that, me included. I catch myself often, but like it's getting better once you got the the gist of it. Mm-hmm. Like you can catch yourself and especially with journaling, I think it really helps a lot. Just put it on paper, right, and write that story out. Like just 2 days ago, I wrote out a story I've never written out before, and also talked to my dad about it and made him talk about stuff that he never talked about before. Like I understand him now better, because his father would always walk out of the conversation when it got heated. He would just leave, Yeah. So that obviously impacted how he would, talk to me. And I was missing, like a bit of like masculinity because my mother would take over too much, right? So it's just all these bits and pieces that I also, you know, still put together, but it makes it like so much, or it makes me a better parent, right? Because I have to understand why I'm a certain way and why, you know, my childhood was in this, you know, a certain way and why my parents were behaving in a certain way. And it's always like, you know, a lot of people always have resentment towards their parents, but, you know, they just didn't know better.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
Like, they didn't have the internet, right? Like, you know,
They didn't have access to the world's information in their hands, right?
yeah.
Well, I'm so glad, and thank you for sharing that example too. I'm glad that you were able to have that conversation with your dad, and you know, that proves to also the other side of what you were asking is like, okay, well, you know, we've got an example of someone who has memories and experiences with mom and dad, someone who neither of them were around, and I was raised with my mom, you know, and I think even what's been really interesting is like, I remember listening to this podcast once, and she talked about how growing up she was always jealous of two people parents because she had one growing up, right? And so she was like, in her mind, people with two parents just had it better, right? They just had it better. And I felt the same way. I had that image of like, oh, well, things must be better because they have two parents to, you know, experience life with. And I remember the first time I had a conversation with my cousin, and I was helping her work through a story about her dad. She had both mom and dad there. And I remember that she worked through this story, and she had this that she shared with me that she remembers growing up saying, oh my gosh, Jenny's so lucky because she doesn't have her dad there, because of the experience that she had with her dad being stern or this or that, whatever it was, right? And I was like, it blew my mind that she could have the same thought of like, oh, you're so lucky in that moment, right? And it's like, you know, we all, while there's experiences that we wouldn't wish for other people, we all get, you know, we all have our own experiences through this life. And having the two parents there is also, like you just said, how many people go through life, get older, and say, I'm never going to be like my mom, or I'll never be like my dad, right? What do we talk about with words? They influence your imagination, your feelings and emotions, and your physiology, right? If I am now, when I say I'm not going to be like my mom, I'm now painting the picture of all of the things that I don't like that she does. I've not expressed, well, if I don't want that, what do I want? I'm just giving myself the imagery of what I don't want. And guess what? Most of the people that say that end up being just like that, right? Versus the person that says, okay, here's what I learned about these experiences. Here's what I'm going to do, or I'm going to work towards doing or being, right? That gives two totally different experiences, and it doesn't discredit, you know, like you said, their parents' experiences and their parents' experiences, and however many other hundreds of sets of parents that had to be alive in order for us to be here today. That's a lot of people, right? Now that we're learning about epigenetics and family history and all the things that impact us, it's like, yeah, some of my ways of being are beyond my mom and dad. You know, I can't put all the blame to them. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for it.
I also think to even extend on that too, I think, you know, you're in a deep state of healing when you can recognize your parents' patterns and how those things influenced you, because then you can make different decisions for your life now. And that is the corrective component of like how we can shift our own family lineage. And then I think what happens too is you don't have any blame. Mm-hmm. There's no blame, because it's not your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-great-grandparents, or anyone else. It's not any of them. I think the reality that's like kind of bland that no one wants to say is that, like, guys, everybody's life is hard.
Everyone.
And there's never been a moment in history where people's lives weren't hard. And just because we have all this new technology and we have all these other things that we can do now, I would argue we're a little bored now. That's why we create problems for entertainment purposes, you know, because we have so much of life figured out that now we have to find meaning in other things. That's why spirituality is so big nowadays, because people need to find meaning in their life. And so the reality is every single person you think about, every time I get on the freeway, I think about this. And we're just outside of LA, y'all. We got some of the worst traffic in the world. So this is my calming technique for me when I'm in traffic, is I'll look at everyone and think about what struggles have they been through? What challenges have they overcome? What beautiful moments have they all been through? What struggles have they done that are just like mine? So then when I'm sitting in traffic, when I would normally be pissed off, right? I'm looking around and I'm like, what a beautiful moment that we're in the world, because like, look at all these people whose lives have converged at this one thing right here where I'm getting to witness it. And I think when you walk around with that type of reverence for life, y'all, everything works out. Whether it's now or later, everything works out. And you just need to shift the way you're seeing your circumstances. And I think that's the greatest opportunity for growth and change in the world that we all have.
Yeah.
It's having reverence for our life and for other people's lives as well. Everyone's struggling. Everyone's having moments just like you're having moments.
Yeah. You just beamed me into happening. I was living in Vegas for a while, you know, just going back and forth with South America and Vegas, and just working there. And I was driving, and like this Asian dude in a family van, you know, like clearly had no driving experience, just like pulled over, you know, just almost an accident. He got out and like just wouldn't care, you know, just didn't care. And I'm like, motherfucker, you know, like it wasn't even my car, you know. And then, you know, at that time I was like, man, this guy doesn't even speak English. He's probably working here for like $3-4 an hour, you know, like what are his circumstances, right? Like, but you know, I just kind of hoped he would show me a little bit of like, you know, remorse, or like just feeling bad for me, you know, because that guy almost, you know, got into an accident with the guy next to me and all that kind of shit. But it was all good in the end. But yeah, that's the thing, you know, we were very oftentimes very close-minded, and like we always think, you know, just us, we're having a hard time, but like everybody has a hard time and everybody has those days, right? And like just showing you a little bit of compassion goes a long way, right? What you talked about before, I would like to go into that a bit more, like the male and the female role in the family and in parenting, and like how important is that, do you think? To keep them, you know, separate, right? Like, because we have this issue right now, you know, and it's obviously media, you know, related as well, and it's like politically oriented, and you know, they try to mix that shit up, you know, and make it, you know, so nobody knows exactly what is, and it's clearly an agenda, but like, I think, you know, the roles should be clear, right? And I also think in communication the roles should be clear, and you know, if like I mentioned before, for me in my childhood it wasn't always clear, right? And that was definitely difficult for me now in hindsight, right? Because I needed like more masculine, you know, talk, right? And yeah, just pick up on that.
Yeah, I think that I'll say real quick and then you can chime in on it. So for me, I think that there's a difference between roles within a family unit and then the concept of energetics, which is the masculine feminine balance that each person has. So everything has its masculine and feminine properties, right? And I think what's really getting confused right now, which is what I think you're alluding to right now, is that just because I may be a little bit more on my feminine side as a man doesn't make me a female. It means that I'm a little bit more feminine as a man. And I think that there's a little bit of confusion that's happening around it, that it's possible, as you mentioned, that it is an agenda that's possible. But for me, like, that doesn't really matter whether it is or isn't, because I think that we all have to make choices and understand that you're not one or the other at any point, that your energetics inside of you are balanced. And I think that there are moments when my natural masculinity comes out and needs to come out. And then there's times when her natural femininity comes out and needs to come out. And I think that one of the things that I like to teach people in regards to that is a lot of people like to think, well, the masculine needs to be the leader. But I'm not one of those leaders that think that leaders have to be in the front. In my opinion, being a leader is understanding when to be in the front and when someone else is better suited to be in the front. So I don't think that when I give her, like when I'm like, yeah, you need to go do this thing because you're way better than I am at this component. That's still, in my opinion, that's still me leading because I'm saying you're better than me, and I think you should do this. Now she has obviously every opportunity to say no, I don't want to do that. But I think that so much of this is knowing who you are and knowing who your partner is as well. And to get more into the role component that I think you're mentioning right now, I think it's important for children especially to see balance. That's what I think. And I think that what is happening, this is my personal opinion right now, is I think we went through a period where masculinity was looked at as toxic and it was looked at as this really negative thing. And I think what's happening now is that through that process of a lot of men losing sight of that masculinity or feeling bad about that, I think now what's happened is there's now a need for more masculine men because now it's so clear we don't want this. We actually want you to be in your healthy masculine. And so for me, I think it's very important to, one, understand the energetic difference between the two, and two, to show up in your authentic one, which whatever that looks like for you. So I'm not one of those people that get super into gender. I do think that it's important for me to show up in whatever my authentic energy is, which sometimes is masculine, but also like I'm very in touch with my feminine side, very much so. And I don't think that makes me less of a man. I actually think that makes me more of a man, because when it's the moment for me to go masculine, you're going to feel it hard and you're going to know that's in there. And it's important for me to balance that with having a strong feminine as well, that I can back up and be more receiving and use my intuition.
Yeah.
That's a natural part of who I am as well.
Yeah. And I'd say that this is definitely a dynamic that we have over the years continued to learn, because it wasn't something that we talked about early on, right? I think prior to 2020, we weren't really even talking about the dynamics at play, more in the sense of like recognizing like, okay, here are the clear established roles, I think that with that, it really does tie back into what we've been talking about, which is communicating your needs, right? And creating the opportunity for ourselves to show up as a united front, and with that communication be able to say like, here's what's on the table, here's what needs to get done, how do we best approach this? Now obviously we don't have kids yet either, and so I think that's also going to be a continued process for us to learn about, and I'm excited about learning about it too, because we do plan on having kids, and we look up to parents and value their role in raising healthy kids. I actually was just in New York, and there was this sticker that someone put up on a post at the park outside of Yankee Stadium, where the old stadium was, and it says, "Your children learn by watching you, and we will rise." Right? And I think that's so important. That's such an amazing place to, establish those values for the family, and being able to recognize it does start with you, right? That's literally been the theme of all of this, right? And it's the core component of what we're bringing to life right now. Us starts with you. That's us. Right? That's us within this unit. That's also us within the world, right? Big picture. It all starts with you. And so I'm glad that you even brought that up in the beginning, is like the family unit and the importance of raising these kids who come into this world, and like we can learn so much from them too, And so It's a continued process that we get to learn about, and we're excited for that when that adventure starts.
Yeah, totally. You will see, like my son is I've said it often, but is very much a mentor to me, like in so many ways. And it's crazy, if you actually embrace the challenge, and, it is a challenge at times, and you just basically go with the flow and you learn and keep evolving, it pushes you in the right direction for sure. Right. But also what you said before, and I wanted to add to that, like what I meant also with masculine versus feminine at home, right? Like it's often like the decision that is made, right, in the end, right? Like you said, the leader, right? Like in the wolf pack, the strongest is in the back, right? Like it doesn't have to be the front. It's more also how do I empower the ones in the front, right? Like to be their best self. And it's that was, I can speak for myself here. It's like that's when when there's too many decisions being made from a feminine perspective, especially with a male kid or a boy, it's probably not the best way, right? Like there has to be a man that's doing the decisions for the boys, and especially in the younger years, right? Like it, but yeah, I mean that's every case is different, but that was just personal experience. You talked about those 7 pillars that you learned about with the Gottman Institute or whatever it was called. That's maybe interesting to me. Could you talk about those a little bit? Because I think it's probably interesting to the listener as well.
Sure. Okay. So if we were going to talk about those, we'd be on here for another hour and a half.
Yeah, just quick.
So this is what I'll say that about the 7 principles is that 1, it doesn't just apply to marriage by any means. All the research was conducted through married couples, and one of the reasons why we like the research so much is because they didn't just study couples one time. They studied them over the course of 20 years. So they were able to see what happened in the initial testing, but also what happened over the course of time within groups that went through their program, as well as groups that did not go through their program, and then what happened between the 2 groups, which that to me is a wonderful study. That shows me commitment on their side, but it also shows that you can do any one experiment in one moment and get some information. Doing the same experiment for 20 years to see what's the long-term result of it, that's some real deal research that you can use. That I think in today's world, stuff like that's becoming more and more important, because you'll read studies, like you get on social media for 5 minutes, you'll see 15 studies, and then you'll go look at the studies, and it's like study was 50 people, and they're trying to apply it to the whole world. It's like, guys, what?
Yeah.
And so for me, this is, hundreds of couples, hundreds, maybe even bordering in the thousands at this point, over the course of time. And so that's an amazing thing. So let me really quick just read what they are, and then you can jump in from there. So the first one is enhancer love maps. So love maps is you can think about it like your roadmap to love. Right? And it's the things that we believe in together. It's the things that we know about each other. And she mentioned earlier, like, we've been together a long time. This person should know everything about me. Well, like, we're also changing all the time. So, like, what I like, I don't listen to the same music right now that I listened to when I was 18.
In 2006,
in 2006. Like, no way I'm not listening to the same music. I'm not dressing the same way. I'm not into the same things. And so as I grow, it's important for me to share those things with her so that she knows this version of me that I'm bringing out, not the old version of me.
Yeah. And being able to tie it back to on my side of the street is being curious about my partner.
Yeah.
Right? Ask questions. Right? So that I can continue to, so it's enhancing the love map. Like, I have a map of Eric in my head. Yeah. And these are the things he likes. These are what he doesn't like. This is new. This is, right? It's enhancing it, keeping it up to date.
And
right?
it's written by me.
Yeah.
So she's not guessing at what it is. I'm telling her.
Because I ask questions too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's basically like navigating our relationship today with the map that I made of him in 2006. Wouldn't work, right?
It wouldn't work at all.
But the reality is, like, some marriages are 2 people who live together. but they don't really know each other, right?
Which is like the worst, but it happens. It definitely happens, Okay, so the second one is nurturing fondness and admiration. And so in a way, this is what we talked about earlier with liking your partner. With you want to think about them warmly.
Yeah.
So you're not having a negative thought or like, "Ugh, I don't want to go home," or like, "It's date night, I don't want to go," or whatever it is for you, you
admire their characteristics,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Talked about respect, like all of those aspects is like thinking of your partner in this warm light, I think is a great way to put it.
And so the third one is turning towards your partner. So when we're struggling and we're in a challenging moment, you have a choice. You can not communicate your wants and needs. You can shut down, and you can turn away from your partner like that, where we're turning away from each other. Or you can acknowledge what's happening and you're turning towards your partner, and now we are in this together, and it's an us thing. I would say the thing that I admire most about our relationship is that we've always been a united front all the time, and we have each other's back, and it's really clear to people when they're around us, like we have each other's back. And so that's a big deal, to walk around and be like, she doesn't have to be in the room with me, but I know she has my back no matter what. And we're on the same team, So the first one, again, enhance your love maps. Second one was nurturing fondness and admiration. Third one is turning towards. And then the fourth one, which is always harder for guys, I think, which is accepting influence. Right? And so here's the thing, okay? Everyone's responsible for their own lives. I'm not responsible for her life. I'm responsible for my life. And I influence the way she lives her life. And so if she doesn't want to accept any influence from me, which might be, hey, I read The Power of Now. You might like this book. You should go read this. If she's not open to accepting influence, then that creates division. And that's another form of turning away, right? Because I'm trying to share this thing with her and she's choosing not to because she doesn't want to accept the influence, right? Now, this is why I say it's hard for guys, because guys really struggle with being told what to do, particularly by a woman. And it's easy to think that hey, you should go read this book is you're telling me what to go do. If it was the other way around, hey, I found this book. I think you might like it. Versus like, I'll find my own books. Like, let me find my own books. Right? And so that's a funny one that I think happens where people feel like a hyper independence. Which independence is great. That's what we need. Hyper anything is not good for you. It doesn't matter what it is. You can fill in anything at the end. Hyper anything is bad for you. Right? So the last three are pretty they're really important ones, I would say. They're all important, but these last three in particular are super important. So this last one here is solvable problems, which most of your problems are perpetual. You're never going to solve them. Right?
Like you're not going to solve all of the problems. And it's important to recognize, we've been having this same argument for however many years. Do we still want to keep arguing like this? Or do we want to agree to disagree or make some type of proposal, whatever it is? There are certain things where we get to recognize like, oh, this is a thing that keeps happening, versus the ones that are like, here's the issue. Oh, solid. Thanks for telling me. I'll go take care of that. Boom, done. Right? But recognize it. Yeah, there's going to be some that we're going to just keep having.
We're going to keep having. Yeah. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to make it personal, So she doesn't like it when I shave. And then sometimes there's like these little hair things that I'll miss when I'm cleaning them up. you know,
And
because
I'm
they're
putting
tiny.
my lotion
They're
on, and on my
microscopic, y'all.
feet, and then there's
Yeah.
like little hairs attached to my feet. I'm like, sweet. I
Yep.
love it.
Yep.
Yeah,
But
there's no woman that likes that, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
I be trying to clean it up, and like she'll find the one tiny one that I missed, the singular
Yeah.
one.
But what's funny though in that space is recognizing he's not doing it on purpose. Like, ooh, here, let me leave this for
me
Jenny.
sprinkle
You
this
know,
everywhere.
like.
So that's an example. Like a lot of your problems are going to be like that's going to be an issue because I'm going to be shaving forever.
Yeah.
So like it could happen. So let's not get caught up in it. You know. So that was 5 solvable problems. Right. Now this next one, this is the one we'd have to get into. So we're going to keep this like really simple, which is overcoming gridlock. So gridlock is when you're I think most people who have been in a committed relationship have found themselves in gridlock at some point, which is essentially I'm saying this thing, you're saying that thing. I'm struggling to not only understand your perspective, but like find a way for us to bridge it. And it feels kind of like you're stuck in this like circle that you just keep going in all the time. And it's hard to get out of it. So, and in Lifted, we call this the stuck and suck. Where you're stuck in this area and it sucks because it feels like you're just going around in circles. And this can happen when you're arguing with people where you're missing the point, right? And so there's a way to get over it, and there's a methodology that you can get out of it. We already gave you guys a couple little simple ways, which is 1, walking away if you're getting too upregulated and take a 15-20 minute break and come back to it. That was one of the ways, right? Taking a breath, right? Like is a big deal. Being able to just breathe a little bit. Getting on the same side of the table. There's a few things like that. And then there's another more detailed way that we could go into. Maybe we could do that on part 2. We can just talk about marriage. And then the last one, which for me, I think is the most important thing for all couples to have, is to have a shared meaning for life and create a shared meaning. So that means that her and I have a vision that we collectively share, that we've discussed, that we're aware of, that she has her role in creating that and I have my role in creating that. And when we don't have something that we're both individually and collectively working towards, well, you're just like floating around and anything can happen and you can be swayed with the wind. And what we want to do is be grounded in who we are and what our relationship is and know where we want to go. And so that we don't get so swayed by the ebbs and flow of life because we're still moving in this direction. That's where we want to go because we made a choice and a commitment to each other and to this thing that we want to go do together. And then when things are hard, it's like, yeah, we're in this together. Like, yeah, it's hard. And we got each other because we're still going there. You know?
Yeah, that's so important. The last one for sure. Because when the North Star is just a new car, right? The Lambo, it's when the Lambo is gone, the relationship is gone, right? So, yeah, exactly. Totally. Yeah, great stuff. Okay. Yeah, we got to an hour and a half. We could keep going, for sure. But yeah, that's I'm open to that part 2 at some point for sure. Because I mean that's so important stuff. You know, I have many questions left that I thought about beforehand, but it's maybe a good time to wrap up. And so where can people find you if they want to work with you or just see what you guys are up to?
Yeah, you can go to our Instagram page. It's at Inspire Change Co. And then through there, you'll be able to find all the other things that we have. We are launching our first course, which is called Us Starts With You. It's amazing, y'all. Like, we spent a lot of time putting it together, and the entire purpose of it is for the individual to get a deeper sense of who they are and where they want to go and release some things for the past so that you can move forward with a clean slate. And that's a big deal. We knew that would need to be the foundation of any relationship work that we did. So we built that first. We spent the last 10 months doing it, and we release it in the beginning of the month. So that'll be available if anyone's interested in that. Her page and mine, we can also leave in the show notes.
Sure.
Mine's Evolve with Eric, and hers is Joyful Jenny. And so, we'd love to hear from any of you guys if you found any value in it. And thanks for having us on. We appreciate you, Max.
Yeah, thank you for your time, guys. That was
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Right, awesome.